Hey tubes, for you guys following along in the 2465 Bravo calibration series, we're going to go ahead and do this today. This is the first procedure that they actually have you do using the diagnostic mode, getting into the what they call the CAL mode. So we're going to be in this manual here. You can look it up online. You'll have to make sure you look it up by that number on the bottom there. I'm going to be on page 5-7, and this assumes that you've done the voltage checks and the DAC adjustments. One thing that I want to point out is that Cal 8 is designed to be done per the manual before Cal 1 through Cal 7 and then Cal 9. Why they did it that way, I don't know. So if you're looking to do Cal 1 through Cal 7 and then do Cal 8 and then do Cal 9, I don't recommend it. That's not what's in the book. It even talks about it a little bit in the book. So make sure that you do this procedure, the Cal 8, before you do the rest. The first Cal 8 you come to is not on page 5-7. It's actually on page 5-4. If you look at the top there, it says 2467 Bravo. You don't want to be there if you have a 65. You want to be on this page here, 5-7 again, where it actually says 2465 Bravo. You can do the checks on the other one, but you're going to be looking for some pots and looking at signals you don't need to look at to do it for the 2465. The other thing is make sure you have the right calibration equipment. You don't have to use the called out equipment like in here, because most modern equipment will easily meet those standards. But the thing is, you have to have the equipment, and that's what this procedure is about. Is I use substitute equipment rather than using the called out equipment, because my shop didn't have that older equipment. It's good equipment, it's just that there's more modern equipment out there. So let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, now that we've established the actual CAL order, I wanted to show you that we're actually in section 5. I don't know if I made that clear earlier. And see, this is where we were at earlier over here. And that's on page 5.1 of section 5. Before you actually start the Cal 1 through Cal 8, you have to move the jumper on P501 to the Cal position, which is pins 2 and 3. 2 and 3 of the P501 are the back 2 pins of the 3 pins. And you have to do that before the power is turned on. One thing it does tell you is that, when you've completed the procedures, to move it to the no Cal position, what it doesn't tell you right here is that you have to turn the power off and then move the jumper before you turn the scope back on. It doesn't tell you in the Tektronix manual, but it does tell you in the Army manual. And I think I can put like a little quick inset of that here. Alright, here's the Army manual I was talking about. So you can look up the Army manual by this number right here. And that is the 21 October 2002 version. If you go over to this part and go down to sections, and go down to section 4, which is the menu for calibration process, it talks about the different steps and things you can do. So let's get down to the actual page where I was showing you about, where it tells you to move the jumper before you turn the power off. This is the locations of things. Alright, here we are. It's on page 41 of the Army manual, and that's 24 alpha, which tells you to press the AB trigger, which gets you out of Cal diagnostics and back into regular scope operation. And then you have to turn the power off and then move the Cal, no Cal jumper into the no Cal position. If you don't do that, then you will lose your Cal stuff that you just did. So you can see that it's not really talking about it in the Tektronix manual, but it does talk about it in the Army manual. So let's go ahead and proceed with the video on Cal Step 8 here. Okay, here we are back at page 507 again, or 5-7. And right here I'm telling you to make sure to check that P105. And I'm going to show you where it's at right here on the scope. It's right here on the A5 card. If you have the older card, I think the newer card's pretty much the same place, and here it is right here. Notice there's 3 pins. The 2 pins in the back, pins 2 and 3, are towards the back of the scope. And pin 1 is the actual no Cal. So we're going to flip the page here. and I'm telling you to go ahead and pull the jumper and move it to the pins towards the back. Yeah, same thing. It's just a reminder. I'm showing you in the book where it's at. And that was on page 5 Tech 1 of section 5. Alright, now we're actually going to get down into here and go ahead and do the actual procedure. The first thing you need to do is go ahead and turn the scope on and wait for it to power up. And it's going to go through its little checks and all that stuff. And then you're going to pull it with a screen. Alright. Now you're going to see that it says it's got a test fault. If it has any of these faults, it'll automatically display them. You have to push the trigger to get out of them. But since my scope has this, we're going to have to do the calibrate. Now to get into Cal 8's actual test procedure here, or sub-steps, you need to push the delta V and the delta T, and then push the slope. You can see it right here on the right with my little finger there. Alright. Notice it says all now instead of that test fault. If you want to get out of it, you just push that AB trigger and that'll get you out of it. But we're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and scroll down here. And you can use the mode button there and scroll down, and you can see you can get to Cal 8. You can go to Cal 8 the other way, but you just got to go through a whole bunch of other stuff. It's just easy to scroll down. Okay, we're at here. I'm just telling you about the trigger coupling button. If you push up, it increments and goes to the next step, and if you push down, it goes to the previous step. So we need to press that upper trigger button to get into all the sub-steps in Cal 8. So here we go, and you'll notice that it actually entered Cal 8 here because the Cal on bottom disappeared. What we're going to do here is we're going to try to match that little dot up there, and we're going to be using the grid bias here, which is that right there. And what they want you to do is turn the scale luminization down. That's the grid pattern there, all those orange things right there. They want that all the way down and out of the way so it doesn't interfere with anything. Now we're going to go ahead and adjust this grid thing, but let's find out where it is first. So we're going to go over here. You're going to notice it's going to give you a diagram of a board there, and that's on the side of the scope. And you can see the components there because in the drawing they have the shield off, but in actuality the shield is actually on it. So, but it's okay. Just follow the lettering there, even though they don't have the resistors marked. Now you can see, you can actually see that there. So you don't really need to adjust it if you can see it, because the whole purpose of adjusting it so you can see it, so that in the next step you can go ahead and move it, which is what we're going to do. So now we're going to use the X and Y for channel 1 and channel 2 to move that trace around. So let's get over there. I just put it up on the screen because some of these things I go pretty quick on. Now normally when you use the positions there, it's for vertical, but it's under computer control now because it's in the Cal 8. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to use our little tool here as soon as we read the instruction. I already know what's coming up, you guys don't. It's actually going to tell us to match the intensity of that little dot that we put towards the bottom of the screen down there. And so you can see it disappearing and then come back up, and then I figured that's close enough, and I want it to be the same. As you can see, I threw that up on the screen there too. And you can get those little tweaker tools. They usually come in probe tips and stuff, probe kits, but you can still buy them out in town. You really don't need that tool. You can use an insulated screwdriver, like a little tweaker and stuff. So we're done with that part. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit the upper coupling button. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next test, which is we're going to look for a dim dot, and we're going to do some intensity and some stuff like that. Alright, so we go over and read the instructions, and they tell us to turn the scale luminization all the way down, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And that's for the grid pattern there, the orange things. Then we're going to check that the dot is visible near the center. And there it is right there. It's pretty dim, but it's fairly easily visible. You can see it right there. So then they want us to turn the intensity all the way fully counterclockwise, which we're going to do here. It's still there, and you notice when I turned it down, it disappeared. And I didn't really go back and show it, so I'm doing it here. And if you actually look really super close, you can actually see it. And I didn't notice it until after I did the videotape on this. And if we go to the next step, it tells you that if it didn't, to go ahead and repeat the test. And then to repeat the test, you hit the lower trigger coupling button, and it'll take you back one step. Remember, I talked about that a little bit, where you can do that. But if it was good, go ahead and hit it, and we're done with that step. So now we're on to the next one here. Okay, moving on now, we're going to do trace rotation, focus, and astig, and some geometry in these tests here. And we'll go ahead and show you where those pots are. They're on that same circuit board there on the side of the scope, which is your high voltage board right there. So let's go, and those are the PDF pages. I was using multiple PDF pages, so that's why you see multiple ones. It really depends on which ones you're using. I like to use PDFs on stuff by Art Tech Media. You can look them up. They're pretty good. The guy's really nice too. So anyways, we're going to use the vertical position control, and we're going to set that channel 1 trace right there in the middle. And I usually like to set it right under the line, because that makes it easier to see when you're making adjustments. And we're going to use the delta cursors for the vertical one, using those two right here. That's those two. And we're going to move them close to the center, at least one. And we're going to play with that a little bit with the intensity control. And this I didn't understand. It asked us to do it and nothing happened. It just controlled the intensity. That's it. It didn't do any alignment, nothing. It was just kind of weird. So I did it anyways. Yeah, that's me saying, what the heck, over? Alright, so we're going to do the trace rotation now. And that's right here on the front. You can use that little tweaker. There you go. And you can see I'm moving a little bit at a time. Let's see if I think I zoomed in here. Yes, I did. If you look real close, you can see it moving side to side. I even put a little inset there for you. Okay, there we go. So the rotation is done. Now we need to adjust the Y alignment. And this is where it's at right here. Fourth one over. On the 67 Bravo, there'll actually be a pot in that middle one, that fourth hole. 1, 2, 3, and then there's 4 here. The fourth hole right there is for the 67 Bravo, not for the 65 Bravo. There's an extra adjustment in there or something. Alright, so here we go. So now we're going to tweak this. Look at it. Look at it twist there. Did you guys catch that U ring in the background? It was one of my co-workers' ringtone. It's kind of funny. And then, of course, it just tells you to repeat it until you get it the way you like it. Alright, then we're going to go ahead and adjust the astig and the focus there for the best display that we can get, the sharpest display. And it really gets kind of funky here if you play around with these too much. If it's already good, I really don't recommend you play with it. But, you know, since I was in here and I hadn't done it before with the scope was already broken. I decided to play with it, and I actually improved it a little bit, just slightly. And you play around with these and it does get better. And then later on we're going to be using some geometry and some other things on the high focus, the edge focuses, all kinds of stuff, and it'll sharpen it up. It's actually not too bad right now. It could be better, but the more I play with it, the better it got. And that's the purpose of the adjustments here. This doesn't really affect actual calibration. This just affects the traces and stuff, you know, the adjustments on the CRT. Hence the title CAL 8 CRT Adjustments. The voltagements and frequencies and all that comes later. See what we can't do here. We're going to move stuff, I believe, over to the edge. So let's get this into the geometry. Here we go. I usually like to just set it in there. Alright, now we're going to move these over towards the edge. And you can see it's already got a little bit of a curve on it right there on the left. Now when I do this, notice the focus and the lettering and stuff on the bottom of the scope. You can see it kind of warp a little bit and start to change and get fuzzy. And that's where you start playing around with your edge focus and your Aztec and your regular focus and your geometry. When you just start playing around with all those things, you just got to kind of go back and forth, and then it works out pretty good. It's really a matter of taste. There's always a little bit of trade-off on them. You'll never get it perfect unless you just got like a super CRT that everything was just great when it, you know, was built, and that's not always the case. Although Tektronix did have a lot of scopes that were, in my opinion, from using scopes over the years, pretty near perfect. So I'm just talking about here, moving things around and showing you the distance. And I think one of them was a little fuzzy. Yeah, as you can see on the top right there. So I started playing around with it a little bit more with the edge focus. And those pot numbers are in the book, in those diagrams. You can see they kind of cleaned up a little bit. Remember the one on the right was all like super fuzzy and fuzzed out like a fan, and now it's not too bad. Now it's pretty sharp. And oh, sorry about that. I bumped the camera. And I move it back over, and I start playing around with the focus and the Aztec again. And the weird thing is when you play with those, it changes the letters too. The script on the screen, it'll change the focus where you can have a good trace, but then your lettering's kind of out and vice versa. So you just kind of got to go back and forth and play with it until you get what you want. And sometimes, like I said, it's not perfect. Sometimes you just really got to go at it. If your scope, like I said before, if your scope doesn't really need it, then don't play with it. Just leave it alone. Just call it good and push the upper trigger button, or upper trigger coupling button, and it'll move you into the next sub-step. And it's just me kind of going back and forth and back and forth. And I finally decided, yeah, it's good enough. I'm going to leave it there. And some of it's camera focus too. You can tell because you can look at the silk screen, the black writing where the knobs are. It's a little bit out of focus. So it's not necessarily the screen's out of focus, it's the camera out of focus. I think this is somewhere in here. And this is where I tell you about, you know, adjusting the focus as to geometry, edge focus, and pretty much all that other stuff. You can get a pretty good looking scope here. Yeah, I called it good. Tired of playing with it. and they're telling me to take this channel 2 and move it off the screen, so I bounce it around a little bit for you guys to see. Yeah, it's off the screen. There we go. Alright, on to the step now. Now they're telling me to connect 50 kilohertz, 8 divisions on the scope. I didn't have one of those, so I set a 5700 Fluke calibrator at approximately 280 millivolts, and I ended up with 8 divisions on the screen. That's full screen, top to bottom, by the way, the 8 divisions. And you can see it's not too bad, the focus and the geometry and, you know, all that stuff isn't too bad. And it just tells you to keep going back and forth until you get it the way you like it. And I did, so then it tells you to pull it off. So we're done with the cable there. And we kind of did that stuff already. Repeat as necessary. And just make sure everything's working. Make sure it stays in focus. And then we're done with that, and we go ahead and push the upper trigger coupling button, and we're done with that substep, and on to the next one. Alright, we're going to go ahead and we're going to adjust the high focus here, which is that pot. And I didn't have a leveled sine generator, so I used 86 Bravo, which is pretty much a CAL standard for a lot of labs and stuff. They're quite old, but they work extremely well, and they're still quite expensive too. And boy, if you ever have to pick one up, they're a ton. Oh, they weigh a ton. Darn things will break your backs. Now, it actually asked for 10 megahertz, and I used 50 megahertz. I don't remember why, but it seemed to work. And what I'm doing here is I've got it connected up, but I didn't have 6 divisions. And since I didn't have the called out equipment, I didn't know what the level was, so I turned it way down. And what I'm doing here is I'm turning the level up to make sure that I have 6 divisions. And for this particular generator, it turned out to be, I believe, 0.4 dB. So right here, I've centered up the vertical on the scope for the 6 divisions with the power and everything. And I'm getting ready to do the next test, which is they actually want me to adjust it for overall focus. So, and I remind everybody I moved it to the edge so I could get a good view on that. In retrospect, I probably should have just left it centered up instead of on the edge. I don't know if it made a difference or not, but I don't know. So anyways, this is where it was. I went ahead and pre-staged my tweaker. I like to do that, so when I'm getting ready to do the step, I don't have to go back and reread. It's already set in there, and I can look at the screen and go. So here I am. I'm just adjusting up the focus. And if you'll notice that the focus actually changes different from the trace. I don't know why scopes do that, but they do. But if you get the geometry and everything right, they'll be pretty doggone close, and it's just a matter of preference if you just want to go back and forth and keep doing it. Now, it asked me to leave the cable on, but it also asked me to push the upper trigger, which I just did. And now we're going to do some, it looks like dynamic centering display on the reticle. So let's go see what's on the screen here. Best I remember, it's a bar once you turn it up. And no, was it a bar? I don't remember. So let's go back here. Let's see. Intensity. Okay. Oh, that's right. They wanted me to play with this pot right here. And just for kicks, I took you over to where it's in the diagram, so you get a little bit of use to actually seeing it on the scope, seeing it in the write-up, and then seeing it on the diagrams themselves, the physical diagrams. And that's right, they wanted me to adjust it sideways and up and down, and it was good, so I went ahead and left it. Okay, There we go. Disconnect it if it's good, and hit the upper trigger button. So went ahead and did that. Hit the upper trigger button. So we're kind of done with that step, or that sub-step. And on to the next one. So we're going to do vertical dynamic centering. You know, if I'm going too fast for you guys here, just go ahead and pause the video as you need. And it's the back pot there, by the way. And if you look real close, you're going to see the dynamic centering is where they're running two traces into one, and they want to make sure that the division between them is fine. So you can see it right here as I'm adjusting it. And one of them is actually brighter than the other one. It's kind of hard to see on the video, but it is. So and then when they get done with that, they want you to press and release the coupler. And that concludes Cal 8, which is your CRT adjustments right there, boom. And you can tell because after you hit the button, you end up with a Cal 8 on the bottom. So that means we've pretty much done it. So that leaves one thing left, and that is, if you remember at the start, you have to actually tell the computer to put the Cal constants in. You do that by pressing the AB trigger, and then you turn the power off, and then you put the jumper over to the no Cal. Then you can turn it back on and check it, make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. So I put a little splash screen up here pretty soon. And it says, "Congrats, kids, you have just performed Cal 8 CRT adjustments. They include the X, Y, and Z axis, trace rotations, focus, Aztec, fast right, high focus, geometry, and a bunch of other crap." Yep. So there it is. This actually took a couple days for me to go through and film this and go back and forth and just, have fun with it and kind of learn it and edit it and get it all up for you guys. So if you guys appreciate it, just give me a thumbs up. If you know more about this procedure, by all means, drop me a line or tell me what I did right or what I did wrong, or if anything didn't matter that I did that I shouldn't have done, like the 50 or the 10 megahertz. But at any rate, I want to say thank you guys for watching. I don't know how many more of these I'm going to put up. These they're quite labor intensive. A lot of back and forth. I actually did these videos, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, and I just started going through them and decided to put a couple of them up, the ones that I didn't think really mattered that much for calibration, but might matter so you can learn more about your scope and the process. So anyways, I want to thank you guys again for watching, and God bless you all, and keep on you out. Bye.